Hey, what's up guys? In today's video, I'm gonna be sharing my female K-pop favorites of 2025 so far. I make this video twice a year, one around the halfway point and a finale towards the end of the year. Here's a snapshot of the 5 categories that I'm gonna be covering today, all of which are based on my personal preferences, just to kind of give you an insight of what caught my attention the most this year. No right or wrong answers here, just me speaking my mind. That being said, without further ado, let's jump right in. The first category that I really want to talk about is my favorite group of the year. Starting with number 6, I've chosen i-dle. Last year I have mentioned how they slightly had a dip in quality, at least in terms of what I'm used to seeing from them. It was clear that they were more focused on quantity over quality, and I get the sense that they were pushing hard for a day song, but their execution just wasn't enough. Not only that, but I feel like nothing from last year really matched the caliber of any prior releases. However, this year, I feel like is a fresh start for them. And I think they kicked off the year in dominating fashion. With the release of both Rebel Heart and Attitude, I've clearly held the lead in the charts and have won many awards early on. And let's not forget about their 5th Perfect All Kill, which surpasses some of the more iconic groups such as Twice and i-dle. So with that, I think i-dle is starting to carve out their legacy even further as a top 4th generation group. However, I think they slightly dropped the ball with their single Dare Me, as to me it came across as a Rebel Heart 2.0 but poorly executed in my opinion. Either way, I think they still have good momentum moving forward, and hopefully they can finish the year strong. Now let's talk about number 5, where I've chosen NMIXX. If you've seen my videos from last year, then you will know how highly I've spoken about them throughout the year. I have even claimed their album Stick Out as my favorite release of 2024. Since then, I've had high hopes for their future in the industry, as I feel like since the beginning of the FE304 trilogy, they've started producing some of the best music out there. So think of songs like Passion Fruit, Sika, and High Horse. As for 2025 in particular, I've been very impressed with how they have given the spotlight to members such as Kyujin, who I think right now is absolutely killing it, and of course Soyoon and Jiwoo, as I feel like in previous comebacks they weren't really given such opportunities, at least from what I've seen. So seeing this kind of shows us NMIXX's true talents from top to bottom. That being said, I think they're slowly starting to develop into a more formidable group within the 4th generation. I still think they have a ways to go to reach the level of a leading group, but I think the path is clearly there for them. So in my opinion, I think NMIXX already produces day song quality music. High Horse is a perfect example. They clearly have the talent necessary to execute live performances at a high level, but the only thing that I think they lack is their stage presence and popularity, which is something that I believe that they have struggled with since the very beginning. I mean, compare them to groups like i-dle or LE SSERAFIM. I could make the argument that NMIXX is miles ahead of those two groups in terms of raw talent, but more than likely, many people would prefer to watch i-dle or LE SSERAFIM live at a concert, simply because their stage presence and popularity is in a league of their own. Not to diss NMIXX at all, but that's just the reality. Now, how do they get to the point where they can match or surpass groups of that caliber? Some people might say better marketing strategies, some people might say payola, who knows, I'm not a professional. All I'm saying is if they want to reach the level of competing for a day song, they will need to improve their stage presence and overall popularity. Moving right over to the 4th group, I've selected Kiki. When I first heard their debut song I Do Me, I was very impressed. They came across as a group that focused on that retro pop sort of nostalgic atmosphere, which initially attracted me to them. But when their mini album Uncut Gem came out, they sort of reminded me of NMIXX's debut in some ways. It felt very quirky, and from what I remember, a lot of people generally didn't like this release, and to be honest, neither did I. The same can be said about NMIXX's debut, and as time passed by, at least from what I've seen, people started to like it later on. And I've personally experienced this myself. With Kiki, however, the only song that really stuck to me in the beginning was BTG, which I would say is such a banger of a song, and if you haven't heard it, I would highly recommend it. But anyway, I kind of sat on this mini album a little bit, and I gave it some time, and I actually started to slowly like the rest of the songs the more I heard them, to the point where I would have each song on repeat. I mean, I just love how dynamic their music is. 1 minute their song gives off this soft and catchy environment, then suddenly kicks off into this whole hip-hop song that just blows me away. Not only that, but I started to dive a little deeper into their live performances, and I gotta say, This group has a ton of potential to become a future leader within the fifth generation. They perform with great confidence, and I think they have strong stage presence for a rookie group. I would easily say that I'm a fan of the group, and I can't wait for their next comeback. Now let's talk about the next group where I've chosen i-dle. Ever since their debut, I think i-dle has been releasing some really good songs, with Magnetic easily being the best debut song among the fifth generation. As for this year, I think they've done a phenomenal job with both Almond Chocolate and their mini album Bomb. Ever since the hiatus of New Jeans, I feel like there's been this void within the Y2K space of K-pop. Now, I'm not saying i-dle is replacing New Jeans, but I think it's fair to say that they are now the leaders of that concept. It's only been a year since their debut, and they have been so consistent with their quality of work and live performances, and I think that they have been leaders within the fifth generation from day one. Now, I wouldn't go as far as saying that they're super talented, but they are strong performers on stage, and I love how they're absolutely thriving right now. I would argue that they are Daesung caliber, and that they could be in the race for a Daesung this year, but it's too early for me to say, as their last release came out a few weeks ago as the making of this video. That being said, I think i-dle is doing a standout job in all aspects, and I feel confident that they will continue to do so moving forward. Now, as for my second choice here, I've gone along with LE SSERAFIM. I think LE SSERAFIM has really made quite a strong resurgence this year with their album Hot and their single Different. We all know what happened last year with their Coachella performance and how it impacted the members for the majority of the year. I personally felt really bad how a lot of their fans turned on them, causing them to go on a short hiatus. However, what I really admired is that they returned even stronger with the release of Crazy, and since then, I think they've been totally dominating the industry. As for this year, it looks like LE SSERAFIM has started exploring different styles, with Hot and Come Over being a clear example. They tapped into more of a groovy kind of aesthetic, which I think they have executed exceptionally well, making them stand out a lot this year, as we don't really see anybody else performing that kind of style. That being said, LE SSERAFIM continues to prove to me that they are not only a leading fourth generation group, but arguably across the whole industry. Above that, I would say that their discography is still damn near flawless, as I see little to no misses, which includes those of this year. I still would love to see solo songs from every member, so hopefully that day comes soon. Now, could they win a Daesung? I think they have a pretty solid shot this year, but I think they would need to push out one or two more releases this year to keep them in that conversation. But with that in mind, I think they're doing a lot better now, and similar to i-dle, they just need to continue with what they're doing. And finally, in first place, I've gone along with the rookie group Hearts to Hearts. Now I know it's probably too soon to tell, but I think Hearts to Hearts has the greatest potential among all the rookie groups to become a leading fifth generation group. Listen, out of all the debut songs this year, my favorite one without question is The Chase. And not only that, but Butterflies is possibly one of my favorite ballads of all time. And I know that's kind of a stretch considering how new it is, as there's so many other ballads out there that are just as good. But Hearts to Hearts really came out swinging with these songs, and it instantly, and I mean instantly, turned me into a fan. Not only that, but I think the choreography for The Chase is an instant fifth generation classic, with pretty much every member having powerful stage presence. So I hope you guys kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about when I emphasize their potential as a group. Now, I will say they're probably not on the level of a Daesung just yet. I would need to see a few more releases to kind of get an idea. I do know that they recently came out with their single Style, which I think was pretty damn good, but not on the same level as The Chase in my opinion. All that being said, this group has caught my attention the most this year. Now let's shift things over to our next category, and that's my favorite song of the year. This was probably my most difficult category, simply because there has been so many standout songs this year, but I feel quite comfortable with my picks here. At number 6, I just mentioned this song a little bit, and that's Hearts to Hearts with their song Butterflies. If you guys are familiar with my content, you'd know that I love my ballads, and this one in particular was a real treat for me. I think Hearts to Hearts has dropped a heartfelt song here that has more of a minimalistic approach, carried by their sweet vocals and emotional storytelling. As mentioned earlier, this would be one of my favorite ballads of all time, maybe within my top 5. I still think LE SSERAFIM's Good Parts is my all-time favorite, and I would find it really difficult to top that. Either way, I think Hearts to Hearts is doing a phenomenal job so far, representing the dreamy youthful cinematic pop sort of aesthetic, which I think was more prevalent in the second and early third generations. Not much in the fourth generation, but we are starting to see a return of that kind of style in the fifth generation, which is really cool. Now, as for the next song, at number 5, I've chosen Lisa's song, Fuck Up the World. I think for several years now, her song Money was my favorite, but I can confidently say that Fuck Up the World is far superior, at least for me. I still think Money is miles ahead in being more iconic, and I feel like that song is a pillar within her career. Back to this song, however, I think we kinda got a taste of what Lisa is truly capable of in terms of her dominance as a soloist and as an idol in general. She really holds nothing back on this song and really showcases how powerful of a rapper she truly is. Lisa executes this song very aggressively, which I think she thrives off of, and I think comparing this to the rest of her songs on her album Alter Ego, nothing else really comes close in terms of quality and execution. I've already shared my thoughts on her album extensively in my previous video, if you want more details, but I would love to see Lisa tap into that hip-hop style more, similar to Jennie, mainly because she comes from Blackpink, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with their style of music, which has strong elements of hip-hop and rapping. So Lisa is already familiar with that style, and I think it would be a smooth transition for her as a soloist. Not to say that she can't explore different genres, I think she can do whatever she wants, but this kind of goes back to my statement about Fuck Up the World being in a league of its own compared to the other songs within Alter Ego. That being said, I think Lisa has done a standout job with this song, and I hope to see more from her in the near future. Now moving right along with number 4, I have chosen Minnie with her song Blind Eyes Red. Guys, this was one of the first songs to come out this year, and I really feel like it came out of nowhere. I don't know, maybe I just wasn't paying attention to the marketing, but I never expected Minnie to have her solo debut. I know she's had other songs, but that's more so collaborative work and promotional songs, but nothing that's truly hers up until now. Anyway, I think top to bottom, this album is a 10 out of 10, but one song that really stuck to me the most was of course Blind Eyes Red. This song in particular showed me a different side of Minnie to the point where now I have a different perspective on her, not just as an idol but now as a soloist. I think she really reached for the stars when creating this song, as her vocals and rapping were on full display from start to finish. This song is super catchy and hits really hard with its strong beats, and it has more of a Western influence, which I think she represented really well, to the point where I would call this a masterpiece. You know, I kind of get a sense of a darker and alluring kind of vibe with this song, which I always love to see darker concepts, just because of how rare they are in the world of K-pop. But being that she's a member of i-dle, she is no stranger to the dark side of K-pop. As you know, they do have quite a few phenomenal songs within that realm, and she brings that into her own creation with this song. That being said, I think Minnie's solo work is Daesung quality, and hopefully she gets recognized for some major awards towards the end of the year. Not only that, but I'm also looking forward to her next solo comeback. Now let's talk about third place, where I've chosen Kiki and their song BTG. Alright, so in my opinion, I think this is Kiki's best song by a long shot, and I say that in regards to their overall creativity and execution. Nothing in terms of popularity, as I'd say I Do Me is their premiere song, but as for BTG, I love how they blend strong hip-hop elements with their playful, youthful kind of concept. There are many twists and turns in this song, showing how dynamic Kiki can execute their music. For instance, one moment they're singing with their sweet vocals, and suddenly the beat drops and they're rapping, switching the vibe entirely. So this song has definitely been a part of my daily rotation since day one, and I would say that this song in particular has made me a big fan of the group. Hopefully, moving forward, they can replicate something to this caliber of music, as I think it would really make them stand out from the rest of the groups within the 5th generation. I would probably say that they're the NMIXX of the 5th generation, not in terms of talent of course, well, that's probably a topic for a different video, but in regards to their style of music being different from your typical K-pop group. Speaking of NMIXX, I have their song High Horse in second place. NMIXX time and time again have been releasing some of the best music out there, at least for me, and this song is no exception. They've been hitting hard the dynamic hip-hop style of music, and High Horse is the greatest example. Similarly to BTG, this song has so many twists and turns, but I think NMIXX turned it up to 11. You know what, I would probably even go as far as to say that this is their best song yet, and I would even consider this their masterpiece. I still think their album Stick Out is their best release from top to bottom, but on an individual level, nothing really competes with High Horse in my opinion. NMIXX has come a long way with their music production, and I think right now they're building up an impressive discography. Well done. And finally, in first place, I've chosen none other than Jennie's Soul City. I still remember staying up late and waiting for the album to drop and going through every song being totally blown away. But something about Soul City really captivated me. This song was such a vibe as it has a very strong city pop influence, which I love so much. This song is very minimalistic, but the flow is so smooth, and Jennie's vocal execution was the cherry on top. I know everyone's favorite song from Jennie is probably Like Jennie, which I feel really took over the whole album, but Soul City took the cake for me. And at the time of release, Soul City was very underrated, but since she pushed out the music video for it, I feel like it has received the appreciation that it deserved. You know, I gotta be honest, I could have filled up this whole category with songs from her album and I would have been just as satisfied, because I feel like so many other songs from that album were just as powerful. So think of songs like Love Hangover, Zen, Like Jennie of course, Filter, Damn Right. I mean, I can go on, but that just wouldn't be fair. But anyway, I think Jennie has done a phenomenal job with Soul City. Now, would I say this is her masterpiece? Hard for me to say, as I think there are multiple songs that could be that answer to that question, but I think it deserves a spot within that conversation. Alright, so now let's move on over to the next category, and that's my favorite idol. Coming in at number 6, I've chosen Yeji. You know, it's been over a year since we kind of got a taste of what her soloist potential could look like with her song Crown on My Head, which was featured on ITZY's Born to Be album, and this year we finally saw her take the stage by herself to showcase what she's truly about with her mini-album Air. I personally think Yeji has done a phenomenal job from top to bottom. Now, even though she only provided 4 songs, I think all 4 of those songs are well polished. And after going through them all, it's quite clear that Yeji stays true to her roots with ITZY, as these songs share a similar concept of being bold and energetic, but obviously with hints of Yeji's personal touch, which I think leans more towards a laid-back kind of vibe, which suits me very well. Now, do I think she can be a formidable soloist? Probably. I think I will need to see a little bit more from her, so maybe something like a full-length album with some variety of styles. That would kind of give me a better idea, but I think as of right now, I wouldn't really put her in the same class as someone like Rosé or Seulgi. However, I think she does have the raw talent to get to that position, but she's still very new to the solo stage, which I think can be significantly more challenging than group work. Now let's talk about another idol that has impressed me a lot this year. At number 5, we have Ham from Kiki. You know, my first impressions of Ham would be that she has a lot of potential to become a standout 5th generation idol. When I watch Kiki perform songs like I Do Me or BTG, Ham really sticks out with her stage presence, vocals, and confidence. I really love her sense of enthusiasm on stage, which kind of tells me that she already feels comfortable being an idol, as I feel like some rookies take a few years to reach that point. So in that sense, I think she's already one step ahead. Now, if we want to talk about talent, I think she's on the right path. I wouldn't necessarily put her on the level of an ace just yet, but I think after a few comebacks, she will be more powerful. Now, Kiki does have a youthful hip-hop style to them, which I think allows for opportunities for Ham to showcase her talents across the board. As of right now, though, I think she's doing really well and probably the strongest all-arounder among the group. Now, I would say it's a 3-way tie between her, GU, and Lee Sol, but for me, Ham gets the slight advantage because I feel like she does take control of the stage when it's her turn to shine. Now, moving right over to the next idol, in 4th place, I've chosen Jiwoo from Hearts to Hearts. You know, this one was pretty difficult for me, as I think pretty much every member of Hearts to Hearts is doing a fine job so far. However, what really stood out to me about Jiwoo is her leadership qualities. I've seen a couple of videos from their YouTube channel, and I kind of got a glimpse of what goes on behind the scenes, and Jiwoo really impressed me with her selflessness. Not to get it confused with selfish, quite the opposite actually. But the way she interacts with her fellow members, she always puts them first before herself, regardless if it's a social activity or in the practice room. Especially for a rookie, I think that's a really great quality to have, as I feel like it would only help them as a group in the long run. Above that, I think Jiwoo is showing early signs of being a pretty solid all-rounder. Her stage presence is also quite strong, however I would make the argument that Carmen's is the strongest within the group. But still, Jiwoo is not too far behind. And not only that, but I think she really suits the dreamy youthful aesthetic of the group, and I gotta say, SM has done it again. They've rounded up some really strong idols here to create their next iconic girl group, which I think we could all agree that they have a proven track record of debuting some of the best lineups in all of K-pop. I feel really good about Hearts to Hearts moving forward, and I'm confident that they'll be a future leader of the 5th generation. Now, coming in at 3rd place, I've gone with Kyujin from NMIX. Guys, I feel like it's been a long time coming for Kyujin, as I feel like since her debut with NMIX, she's always struck me as that one maknae that has shown early signs of being a total prodigy, and because she's surrounded by so much talent, she has the opportunity to develop into a total ace. I would say with the release of Forward, the spotlight has been on her pretty much the majority of the time, or at least it feels like that because she's been absolutely killing it with this comeback. Songs like Know About Me is a prime example, and in the past I would say that she's always been a step or two behind Haewon in terms of overall talent, but I think this year she's pretty much on par with her. I'm really loving her FE304 era, as I feel like she's really soaking in the rapping and hip-hop style, which you can clearly see that she is thriving. I mean, Kyujin can pretty much do it all, whether that's singing, dancing, and rapping, which I would say is a night and day difference compared to her debut days. Now, I would also say both Soloyun and Jubu have improved a lot as well, but I think Kyujin is just in a league of her own. And she's still really young, she's only 19, and I feel like we have yet to see her in her most strongest form yet, so she's definitely an idol to keep an eye on moving forward. And in 2nd place, I have chosen Minnie from i-dle. I feel like I've already explained everything about her solo comeback in the last category, much of which I would also relate to her being my 2nd pick here. What really stood out to me is her great potential of being a soloist at a high level. With her solo debut, she provided a great variety of styles, and it kind of gave us a glimpse of what she is truly capable of in the world of K-pop. Not only that, but I'd say that she performs quite well on stage by herself, and it shows that she's truly built for this. I mean, she's already given us 7 years being a member of i-dle, so obviously she does have that foundational skill set of being a soloist, and similar to Yuki, I feel like Minnie does have a clear path ahead of her to become just as successful, if not more. Now, if we're just talking about solo debuts, I feel like out of the majority of the idols out there that are soloists, I think Minnie's debut is my favorite. I think her quality of work right out the gate is just on another level, but also the generous selection of music styles and genres shows that she's willing to push outside of her boundaries, which I love to see. Moving forward, I do hope to see more work from her, and hopefully she gets a couple of wins later this year. Now in 1st place, and probably to nobody's surprise, I've chosen Jennie from Blackpink. So towards the end of last year when Jennie started to announce her upcoming solo album, I had pretty high expectations, mainly because I thought her single Mantra was a big hit, so I was expecting something similar. But when Ruby came out, I was just totally blown away. Jennie has surpassed my expectations tenfold with this album. I mean, just the sheer number of songs was so generous of her, and not only that, but the variety of songs that span from multiple styles and genres really had me in awe the entire time. Aside from her album, however, I think what really surprised me the most was her solo activities. I mean, she was really pushing this album hard across the globe, and has held many performances like on Jimmy Kimmel, Coachella of course, and she even had her own mini tour. And out of all of her performances, I think the one that helped her out the most was Coachella. It really feels like after her performances there, her song Like Jennie really blew up, which I think only grew her fan base even larger than what it already was. I mean, especially in the West, where I think both her and Rosé are absolutely killing it. That being said, I'm very happy to see My Ultimate Bias just dominating the world of K-pop this year. I'm crossing my fingers that we get to see more solo work from her in the near future, and hopefully she secures a couple of day songs to finish off the year as well. Now, on to the next category, my favorite choreography. I gotta say guys, this was another difficult category for me, but for the opposite reason. I feel like this year there hasn't really been that many choreographies that really left an impact on me. At least not to the effect of previous years, but still there's a whole nother half year to go through, so that could change later on. But anyway, starting us off at number 6, we have i-dle with their choreography from Attitude. I feel like i-dle is one of the few groups left these days that really focuses on that elegant style and concept, which I think they perform flawlessly. There's a certain charm to their live performances that have a cinematic sort of flair, and I think for Attitude, they have done a standout job. Probably one of my favorite i-dle choreos in a while. Attitude is both minimalistic and dynamic at the same time. What I really liked about it is how they even added a few touches from some of their members' trendy moves. So for example, Won Young's hip swing and Ray's guinea pig dance. Now, would I say that this is some of their best work? Probably not. I'd still put choreos like Baddie and 11 miles ahead of Attitude, but either way, I think i-dle is heading in the right direction. Coming in at number 5, we have Yeji with her choreography from her title track, Air. You know, I think Yeji is one of the most talented dancers of the 4th generation, and I think coming from a group that is well known for their aggressive choreography, ITZY of course, I think Yeji stays true to her powerful dancing attributes. This choreography has a great balance of being both sleek and sensual, with moments of her showcasing how sharp and fluid her moves can truly be. Now, obviously Yeji didn't go all out here. I think she can actually perform a lot more powerful than this if she really wanted to, but clearly there's a theme to follow here. That said, for her solo debut, I think she hit the nail on the head with this one, not just for the song itself, but also for the choreography. Well done. Up next, and in 4th place, I've chosen Hearts to Hearts with their debut, The Chase. This is probably one of my favorite debut choreographies in a while, and one of the standout choreographies within the 5th generation. I like how there's a lot of moving parts to this performance, as they are a 8-member group. They also have a lot of moments where they mirror each other's moves, which makes it really easy on the eyes, but there's also a lot of footwork, jumping in and out of formation, which makes things look a lot more dynamic. Not only that, every member here had an equal chance to shine, which I love to see, but what really caught my attention the most is how strong they are in sync when performing. You can really tell that they've spent a lot of hours in the practice room ahead of their debut, and I think it totally paid off. Not to mention, I think it was pretty cool how some of their moves have started trending, so like for example their iconic hip swing, which I see so many other idols performing. So in that sense, I think they have already started building their global reach potential. And now moving right over to 3rd place, I've gone with LE SSERAFIM's Hot. You know, I gotta say, LE SSERAFIM has some of the best choreography within the 4th generation, so think of Anti-Fragile, Perfect Night, Unforgiven, I mean, I can go on forever. And as for this one in particular, I think LE SSERAFIM has added another standout choreography to their arsenal. What I really liked about this choreography is the variety of movements and style. The best way I would describe it is that it's both elegance with a mix of swagger. One moment they're spinning around and giving off such a powerful aura, and suddenly they're doing the moonwalk. I mean, this really made my jaw drop to the floor. I never expected seeing K-pop idols doing the moonwalk, but here we are. I would say besides the moonwalk, this choreography isn't necessarily as complicated as something like Eve Psyche and The Bluebeard's Wife, which I still think is one of the strangest titles for a song, but whatever. LE SSERAFIM really knows how to make their dance moves trendy, and I feel like that helps them a lot with building their fan base, since we live in a world where platforms like TikTok have a heavy focus on viral dance videos. So in that regard, I think LE SSERAFIM has a certain strategy which I think they're taking full advantage of, and I think that will only benefit them in the long run. Alright, now moving on to 2nd place, and I feel like this one might shock some of you with the placement, but I've chosen Jennie's choreography from her song Like Jennie. Now I know this is probably the most popular choice, and for good reason. With her dominating performance at Coachella, I feel like this choreo has been recognized globally, and at this point, it really feels like I've seen everyone give this dance a try, and honestly I was really close to making this 1st place, however my final choice has the slight edge, which I'll discuss next. But as for this one in particular, I think Jennie has shown her true potential as a performer, and I know she gets constant hate for being a little lazy at times, which I think is valid, but here we get to see Jennie firing on all cylinders, which I think kind of shows her being a pretty strong dancer. Now, I wouldn't put her in the realm of some of the best dancers in all of K-pop, but this was a really good performance from her from start to finish. Jennie herself keeps things minimal, but her swagger is what really carries the performance in my opinion. She clearly thrives within the urban hip-hop style, much of which can be attributed to her time with Blackpink and YG, who has a strong history of developing their idols similarly. Now, it's clear that Jennie has a strong focus on presence more than complexity. This isn't necessarily the most difficult choreography out there, but this performance does highly involve backup dancers, which I feel like really puts an emphasis on her being the center of attention. There are many instances where the backup dancers react to Jennie's movements, which makes it really cool to watch, and I personally prefer the version from the music video just because there are way more dancers than a live version, but either way, I think this choreo is one of the highlights of 2025, and I would even call this an instant classic. And finally, my favorite choreography of the year belongs to none other than Meow for Hands Up. I think since their debut, Meow has had some really impressive live performances, and even though they don't have much, for what they do have, I think it's some of the best within the 5th generation. Not only that, but I think their potential to become a leading 5th generation group is just as good. Back to this choreo though, there's a clear focus on showing off their physical raw power. I mean, dancing is clearly their specialty, and this was a perfect showcase. What I really love about it is their high-speed maneuvers with sharp movements. I would say that this choreography is quite difficult to perform, not just because it's fast-paced and footwork, but also because there's a lot of moving parts here. They have a strong inspiration on the hip-hop theme with elements of party-like freestyles, which I think makes them unique compared to other groups out there. Above that, this choreo feels very dynamic throughout. What I find unique is that while they do have backup dancers join them, they're not very dependent on them. There's a lot of moments where they switch things up so it doesn't feel as repetitive as your typical performance. That said, I think Meow has done a phenomenal job here. Now, would I call this a highlight of 2025? Sure. Would I say this is a classic? Probably not. I think Meow is still in the process of building themselves up as a contender within the fifth generation, but they are really close, like I mean really close. I feel like as they start adding more to their discography, they will no doubt receive more attention. Now moving along to the final category, and that's for my favorite release of the year. So this includes things like EPs and full-length albums. Starting out at number 6, and this might be a surprise to some, I've chosen Kiki's Uncut Gem. Now I know probably the majority of people didn't like it. I made a poll about it when it first came out, and the answer was quite clear. And to be honest, I felt pretty much the same way initially. But much like I explained earlier, I gave this release a second chance, and I sat on it for a while, and it really grew on me. I really like how they're trying to be different with their music style. It sort of comes off a bit random at first, but after a few listens, you really start to see the magic shine through it. They have a strong emphasis on the youthful atmosphere with a blend of hip-hop music, and I think their quality of work for each song is pretty strong. I will admit, there are some moments that I found a bit cringe, like in debut song, but besides that, I genuinely enjoyed it. As I said earlier, BTG remains my favorite of the bunch, and if they can replicate something like that later on, I think they will start to capture the attention of more fans. Let's not forget about I Do Me, which is their premiere song, and I would say that it's the song with the most consistency from start to finish. I would say, however, that song in particular feels more cookie cutter, in the sense that there are many groups out there that are tapping into that youthful Y2K aesthetic. I noticed ever since the rise of New Jeans, there have been many other groups that have adopted the same style and concept in the fifth generation. Now, I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it just feels a little oversaturated in my opinion, and the same can be said about the hip-hop style as well. With all that in mind, I think Kiki really stands out among the rest of the fifth generation groups by their quirky style of music. Will we see them follow the same road NMIX has taken? And by that I mean, will they continue to try to be different in their own unique way? It's still too early to tell, but I think for their first mini album, they've done a pretty good job. And now at number 5, I've gone along with NMIX and their third album of the FE304 trilogy, Forward. You know, last year I've spoken so highly of NMIX since their album Stick Out, which was actually my favorite release of 2024, and to this day I will still say that that album is their masterpiece. Talking about Forward, however, I didn't really feel the same impact. Now don't get me wrong, I still think this album was one of the best releases of the year, but personally I just think that they took a slight step back with this one. I don't know, maybe my expectations are just too high for them. Now, I don't really have anything negative to say about this album, I simply just don't think it's as good as Stick Out. That said, I think High Horse is probably my favorite song from them ever, with Ocean being a really beautiful ballad and Papillon being such an underrated favorite. Regardless, I think NMIX has done it again by bringing us some top shelf music. It still amazes me how their music is not getting the proper attention, because I believe that they're creating some Daesan caliber work here. Even so, I noticed a rise in their fandom, particularly within my community and other platforms as well. So in that sense, I think NMIX is heading in the right direction. Back to this release though, what I really love is the variety of music here. Even though it's not much, with only 6 songs, I think each one is well polished. I would say for me, every time NMIX comes out with new music, it always changes my top 10 for them, because that's just how good their music truly is. They give us ballads, hip-hop songs, pop, and so forth. I mean, at this point, it really feels like NMIX can perform any genre, which I think makes them one of the most talented groups of the 4th generation. That said, I'm curious, will they continue with the FE304 series, or will they return with something entirely new? Personally, I hope they start with something new. I think closing off the FE304 trilogy with Forward would make it such a memorable era for them, as I would say within this trilogy they have grown so much as a group and have really built much of their legacy as well. Now moving right along to number 4, I've gone with Triple S and their album Assemble 25. You know, last year I was introduced to them with their album Assemble 24, mainly because of their insanely large lineup of 24 idols, which is pretty much unheard of. I remember when I first got into K-pop, I thought Twice was the biggest lineup, but boy was I wrong. Anyway, I think Assemble 24 was really good, but Assemble 25 is just much, much better. What really amazes me about this album is the generous 10 songs that they have provided with various styles, all done at premium quality. I mean, the same can be said about last year's album, but I think if we're going one for one, Assemble 25 wins every time. I think Triple S makes some of the most underrated music out there, and their whole discography is loaded with hidden gems. I know the song Are You Alive is their premiere song for this release, but I personally think the B-sides were way stronger. Songs like Love Child, Diablo, and Too Hot are prime examples. That said, would I say this is their best release? Honestly, yeah. I know they have so many singles that are some of their best work, but I just think Assemble 25 overpowers anything that they have pushed out before, and is practically flawless from top to bottom. Moving forward, I feel quite confident about their quality of work. It's just a matter of getting their one shot at going viral to receive the right attention. I would say that they are among the best within the 5th generation in terms of music, but clearly they have a ways to go to build their legacy. Now let's talk about number 3, where I've chosen Minnie's album, Her. I feel like I've already gone over the majority of the points that I wanted to cover, but if there's anything else, I will say that 2025 was really the year of the soloists. I mean, there's just so many to choose from, and I think Minnie was one of the most impressive, especially considering that it's her solo debut. Now, would I stack her up against the rest of the soloists? Probably. I think she's quite formidable. Now, obviously, I think it would take a few more releases from her to become one of the best, but she does have that potential. That said, I hope this just marks a new beginning for her. Her style really fits my taste, and I would love to see more of her solo work. To top it off, I would say that this album made me a big fan of Minnie. Not enough to replace Yuki as my bias, but I'll admit it was pretty close. Now at number 2, I've chosen LE SSERAFIM with their mini album Hot. You know, looking back at a lot of LE SSERAFIM's past releases, I think that it's hard for me to say that they've had any misses, and to be honest, I'd say that that statement still stands. LE SSERAFIM has been absolutely thriving lately, and Hot is probably one of my favorite releases from them in a while. This is arguably their most interesting concept yet. It feels very disco heavy and groovy with a modern twist to it, which I'd say stands out the most when comparing it to their previous concepts. Now, even though this was a very small release with only 5 songs, I feel like they still managed to squeeze in a great variety of music. However, I was a bit disappointed that they didn't include a ballad this time, which I know I've mentioned that before many times. But I think they have more than made up for it with their song Ash, which I would say is my personal favorite from this release. And I might even toss that song within my top 10 favorite LE SSERAFIM songs of all time, which is kind of hard for me to say considering that they have so many other songs out there that are just as good, if not better. With all that in mind, I think LE SSERAFIM has more than proven to be one of the best within the 4th generation when it comes to making music, at least for me. And I've talked about this in more detail in my previous video if you want to check that out. But moving forward, I have no doubt that they'll continue to bring more high quality music. And you know, they're still fairly early in their career. It's only been like, what, 3 years? And I feel like we've seen so much from them already. So in that regard, I think LE SSERAFIM has already supplanted themselves as a rising legendary group. And finally, in first place, I've chosen Jennie's album, Ruby. I think if we want to compare this album to any other release this year, nothing else really comes close. And that goes for both groups and soloists. I mean, this album has some of the biggest hits of the year, much of which are some of Jennie's best work. This includes songs like Mantra, Love Hangover, Zen, Extra L, and of course the rest are just as good. Jennie was so generous here with a staggering 15 songs in total, all of which range across different styles and genres with a clear focus on rapping, which is of course her specialty. Nothing here feels generic, and it's clear why this album got delayed, and that's because Jennie polished it to her liking and perfection. And personally, I wish everybody took this approach. There's nothing more disappointing than a rushed release. I'd rather have one good release per year than 3 mediocre ones. Anyway, I love the sheer variety of music within this album. Jennie tackles every emotion here, whether it's the cinematic vibes of Zen, to the chill atmosphere of Soul City, or even the sensual side of her with Handlebars. I find it very hard to get bored of this album as there's a song for every mood, so in that sense, this album has a lot of replay value to it. And I gotta say, this album in particular has changed my perspective on Jennie. I always thought that she was a strong idol, but not like this. She has exceeded my expectations tenfold, and I would argue that she is in her most powerful form yet, and is clearly in her prime. Back to Ruby though, I think Jennie more than proved that she isn't one-dimensional, as she can perform just about any genre you throw at her, and for me, it's a breath of fresh air to see her push outside of her boundaries and try something different. Now, I already believe that Jennie has built most of her legacy with Blackpink, and will go down as a legendary idol, but with this album, I think she further cemented herself as one of the greatest idols of all time. And there you guys have it, part 1 of my female K-pop favorites of the year. We're only halfway through 2025, and I already feel like we've seen so many releases come out, and I have no doubt that part 2 of this video will look much different. I will post that video probably sometime around November, so if you guys want to stick around for that, that'd be cool. If you enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like, as that helps the channel out a ton, and if you're into these kind of videos, then subscribe for more. Also, let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and what are some of your favorites of the year so far. That said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.